My lawyer called me on a Tuesday morning and said, "Margaret, your son is threatening to contest." I told him to let him try. Then I hung up, poured myself a glass of wine. It was 11 in the morning. I don't care. And I sat in front of the window that overlooks the garden and thought, how did we get here? I am 73 years old. I have 15 businesses, properties in 4 states, and an income that would make most people dizzy. I built all of it from scratch, starting at 27, with 2 children under 6 and $40 more in debt than I had in savings. I have been divorced for 42 years. I do not regret that either. And right now, my son and my daughter are not speaking to me, not because I'm sick, not because I did something cruel, but because I am spending what they have already decided is their money on people they will never meet. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I love my children. That is not in question. What is in question is whether love entitles someone to your estate before you're dead. And I've decided the answer is no. Let me tell you how this started. Not the dramatic version, the real one. 3 years ago, I was in Nashville for a real estate closing. I finished early, had 2 hours before my flight, and I walked into a diner on 2nd Avenue because I wanted coffee that didn't come from an airport kiosk. There was a woman sitting 2 tables from me. She looked about 60. She was staring at a bill, an actual paper bill, the kind from a hospital. And her hands were shaking slightly, not violently. Just the way hands shake when someone is trying very hard not to fall apart in public. I watched her for a moment. Then I asked the waitress what her name was. The waitress said, Patricia. I told the waitress to bring Patricia whatever she wanted and put it on my check. Then I walked over and sat down. Patricia had just been told that her insurance wouldn't cover a second round of treatment. She wasn't asking for anything. She wasn't even crying. She was just sitting there with this bill and this look on her face that I recognized immediately. It was the look of someone doing the math and not liking the answer. I paid the bill, not the coffee, the hospital bill. I got the number from her, called my accountant from the parking lot, and it was done by Friday. $61,000. I flew home and didn't think about it as charity. I thought about it as what it was. An opportunity I had that she didn't, and a decision I made in about 40 seconds. Now here's what I didn't know then. I was going to keep doing it. Not impulsively, not randomly. But I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. Or maybe I had always paid attention and just never acted on it. I'm still not sure which one is true. That bothers me. Over the next 18 months, I helped 11 people. 11 specific people whose situations I learned about directly. Not through organizations, not through fundraisers, not through someone else's curation. I met them or I was close enough to the situation to understand exactly what was needed. A man in Cincinnati named Gerald, whose bakery was going under after 40 years because a pipe burst and the insurance claim was delayed. A 26-year-old named Danny who had gotten herself out of a situation I won't describe in detail, but let's just say she needed an apartment, first and last month's rent, and a used car. And she needed it fast. An elderly couple in Scottsdale, the husband had been my property manager for 9 years, who were about to lose their home because of decisions their adult son had made with their joint account. Each one was specific. Each one was personal. Each one cost me real money and 0 sleep. My children didn't know any of this was happening. That is the detail that became the problem. I want to stop here and be honest with you about something. When I look back at why I didn't tell them, I told myself it was because it was my money and my business. And that's true. But I think there was something else underneath that. Something I didn't want to examine. I think part of me already knew how they would respond, and I didn't want to deal with their response. I wanted to keep doing what I was doing without having to justify it. That says something about all 3 of us, and none of it is entirely flattering. Thomas found out in February of last year. He's 48. He works in finance, which I find amusing given that he watched me build everything he knows about money from a kitchen table in a 2-bedroom apartment. He found out because he'd been looking at some of the family trust documents with his attorney. Prospective estate planning on his end, apparently, which tells you something. And he noticed certain transfers that didn't correspond to any business activity. He called me. He was calm at first. He asked me to explain the transfers. I explained them. The calm did not last. He said, "Mom, do you understand what you're doing to the estate?" I said yes. He said, "Do you understand that this affects Rebecca and me directly?" I said, I understood that he believed that. And then I said something I probably should not have said in that tone, which was, "Thomas, the estate is mine until I'm dead. And I'm not dead yet." That was not the most diplomatic sentence I've ever produced. Rebecca, she's 40, called 2 days later. Her approach was different. Rebecca is softer than Thomas. She didn't come in with numbers. She came in with feelings, which in some ways is harder to navigate. She said she felt blindsided. She said she felt like I was making decisions about the family without including the family. She used the phrase "our future" twice, and both times I had to stop myself from pointing out that my future and her future are not the same future. We are not in the same chapter of our lives. But I heard her. I did hear her. And I'm not going to pretend she was entirely wrong to feel what she felt. Here is what neither of them said, but what both of them meant. They had already spent this money in their heads, not greedily. I don't think either of my children is greedy in the conventional sense, but they had arranged their understanding of their future around the assumption of an inheritance. And I had, without warning, started making that assumption unreliable. I had given them reason to believe a thing was certain. That's on me. What I could not and cannot accept is that this belief, their belief, should have more weight than my judgment about what to do with my own money while I am alive and entirely in my right mind. And I want to be very clear, I am entirely in my right mind. Anyone who wants to suggest otherwise is welcome to sit across from me and make that argument in person. I kept going. After the calls with Thomas and Rebecca, I kept going. There was a woman named Louise in Memphis, 71 years old, former school teacher, incredible woman. She had one of those situations where her late husband had a pension that died with him, and she had been making it work for years on Social Security and a little savings, and then her roof gave out. Just the roof, $38,000 she didn't have. Her daughter was trying to help, but the daughter had 3 kids and a mortgage. Louise was sleeping in her living room to avoid the bedroom because of a water stain that was growing. That's not a metaphor. That's just a wet ceiling. I sent the money. I also sent a contractor I trusted. Louise sent me a card afterward, an actual paper card with a stamp. And in it she wrote that she hadn't slept in her own bed in 4 months. That card is on my desk. I look at it sometimes when I'm having a bad day, which is less often than it used to be. There was also a man named Reuben, 53. He had a small printing business that was his entire life. He'd started it at 28 and had kept it going through things that would have finished most businesses. His equipment failed at the worst possible time. He needed $40,000 in about 10 days, or he would lose contracts that were the backbone of his income. His bank said no. 2 other lenders said no. A friend of mine who knew him mentioned it almost in passing, and I said, "Send me the information." I looked at his books. I'm not sentimental about money. I've been in business too long for that. His numbers were solid. His situation was temporary. His problem was timing, not competence. I sent the money as a loan, at 0 interest, with no repayment schedule except when you can. He paid it back in 14 months. He didn't have to do that. I wasn't going to chase him. But he did it anyway. And he sent a handwritten note with the last transfer that said he wanted his kids to know their father paid his debts. I don't know why that one hit me as hard as it did. It just did. After about 2 years of this, after 12, 13, 14 people, I started thinking about structure. Not because I wanted credit, not because I needed a tax mechanism, though my accountant appreciated the thought, But because I realized I had been doing this based entirely on proximity and accident, I happened to be in that diner. I happened to know Reuben's friend. What was happening to people I wasn't close enough to see. I started the foundation quietly, 8 months ago. It is small by foundation standards. It is focused on one thing: financial emergencies for people in the second half of their lives who have done everything right and hit one specific wall. Not chronic poverty. Not systemic issues, though those matter. One wall. One moment where the math stops working and there's no one positioned to help. Thomas and Rebecca know about the foundation now. Thomas has not called me since I told him. Rebecca calls every few weeks. We talk about other things. There is a subject we are circling that we haven't landed on yet, and I think we both know it. I don't know if they will forgive me. I'm not sure forgive is the right word for what this situation requires. What I think this situation requires is a conversation none of us are entirely ready to have yet, about what parents owe children and what children are owed and where the line is between love and expectation. I think about Patricia sometimes. The woman in the diner with the hospital bill. I have no idea what happened to her after the treatment. I don't know if it worked. I never asked for updates. That wasn't the transaction. The transaction was, you need this, I have it, done. Maybe that's cold. Maybe that's just what competence looks like without performance. I am sitting here in green. I always wear green if you haven't noticed, because money is not something I'm embarrassed about. And I am 73 years old, and I am telling you that I do not regret a single transfer, not one. What I do sit with, what I genuinely sit with, is this. My children did not choose to have a wealthy mother any more than I chose to be a poor one at 27. They grew up inside something I built, and they arranged their expectations around it in ways that probably felt completely reasonable to them. I taught them that this wealth was the family's wealth. I used that word. Ours. I said it. And then I changed the terms without warning and acted like that required no explanation. I'm not saying I was wrong to do what I did. I'm saying the way I did it had costs. And those costs have faces. And 2 of those faces are people I love. The money is still mine. The decision is still mine. The foundation is still running. And I still don't know if I did this right. I know I did it. I'm not sure those are the same thing. Here's what I'll leave you with, because I think this is actually the question worth sitting in. When someone has spent their whole life building something, genuinely built it, from nothing, with their own hands and their own mind, does the fact that their children exist give those children a claim on it before it's given? And if it does it matter whether those children need it or simply expect it? I don't have the answer. I'm not sure there is one answer. But I think the question is worth more than most people are willing to give it.